Welcome to Vintage SF. I'm Richard Rempel. Today, I want to talk about authors whose books, whose bibliography or oeuvre have always been in print. This is an incredible feat. It's fine to look at all these Vintage SF novels, but if you can't find them, how are you going to read them? For the books I'm going to recommend today, you can easily find a physical copy, an audiobook, or an ebook. You can find them in online stores, contemporary bookstores, and even used bookstores. I had a few caveats in creating this list. 1. I wanted an author who had many works that were still in print. 2. This author's work should have been continuously available. 3. These aren't obscure authors. Whether it's film, television, or libraries, you've seen their work. And in looking at the test of time, I also wanted authors who are not with us anymore. This top 10 is not a ranking, this is more of a list. I've ordered them chronologically, starting with the earliest novelist. At the end of this video, I will have some honorable mentions with perhaps an explanation of why they weren't included. So enough introduction. Let's get to the top 10 authors whose work never went out of print. Jules Verne, 1828 to 1905, was a French playwright and novelist, generally thought of as one of the two founding fathers of science fiction. Verne's adventure novels were optimistic and pragmatic. His most famous two may be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth. These are novels that are accessible to readers of all levels. Verne's extrapolation of science was always just a few years ahead of itself. Verne's work was attractive to filmmakers, and there are many adaptations. Herbert George Wells, or H.G. Wells, 1866 to 1946. This UK writer is known for The Time Machine, An Invention, The War of the Worlds, and The Invisible Man. H.G. Wells possessed a prolific imagination which remained solidly based in biological and historical possibility, and his best works are generally regarded as exemplary of what science fiction should aspire to do and be. He is considered the second father of science fiction. As with Jules Verne, there are many movie and TV adaptations of his work. Robert A. Heinlein, 1907 to 1988. Heinlein was a U.S. writer. He served as a naval officer for 5 years and then retired due to ill health. He began writing science fiction and was first published in 1939. From the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, Robert A. Heinlein may have been the all-time most important writer of genre SF. Though not its finest SF writer in strictly literary terms, his preeminence from 1940 to 1960 was both earned and unassailable. For half a century, he was the father, loved, resisted, emulated, of the dominant U.S. form of the genre. Perhaps his most famous novels are Starship Troopers, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and Stranger in a Strange Land. While we're talking about novels here, do not forget that many of these writers are very famous for their short stories. Isaac Asimov, 1920 to 1992. Asimov is a U.S. writer who was born in Russia, brought to the USA by his family in 1923, and became a U.S. citizen in 1928. A scientist, he also wrote short fiction. He sold his first short story in 1939. A series of short stories from the 1940s were combined to make a trilogy of novels, the Foundation Trilogy. Foundation, Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation. Many people may now know Isaac Asimov through the adaptation of the Foundation series. Another series of stories were famously collected in I, Robot. Perhaps his best robot story, a novel, is entitled The Caves of Steel. The Science Fiction Writers of America were founded in 1965. They recognized authors with awards called the Nebulas. They polled their members to find out which stories prior to 1965 should have won awards. The number one vote getter, Nightfall by Isaac Asimov. Arthur C. Clarke, 1917 to 2008. Clarke is a UK author who lived much of his life in Sri Lanka, from the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. For many readers, he is the very personification of science fiction. Never a literary author, he nonetheless writes always with lucidity and candor, often with grace, sometimes with a cold, sharp evocativeness that has produced some of the most memorable images in science fiction. He is deservedly seen as a central figure in the development of post-World War II science fiction. He is probably best known for the screenplay and novelization of 2001: A Space Odyssey. One of his novels from the 1950s is an SF classic, Childhood's End. Clarke's 1973 novel, Rendezvous with Rama, won both the Hugo and Nebula Awards. Clarke, along with Heinlein and Asimov, were called the Big Three of science fiction. They opened up the market for bigger contracts and more novels. John Wyndham, 1903 to 1969. His full name, John Wyndham Parks Lucas Beynon Harris. At times he used a variety of these names as pseudonyms: John Beynon Harris, Wyndham Parks, Lucas Parks, and Johnson Harris. Wyndham's career can be broken into two parts: before World War II and after it, when he became Wyndham. Much of his pre-World War II tales were space operas. His post-World War II novels present an eloquent post-trauma middle-class UK response to the theme of disaster, whether caused by forces of nature, alien invasions, evolution, or man's own nuclear war. All of his post-World War II novels are available today. Some of the best are The Day of the Triffids, The Chrysalids, and The Midwich Cuckoos. Ray Bradbury, 1920 to 2012. Bradbury grew up in the Midwest in a small town. In 1934, his family moved to California. That Midwest experience, though, is very present in his work. He is primarily a short story writer, so some of the books we'll be talking about are collections of stories versus novels. In the 1950s and 60s, his work crossed over into the mainstream, and he became known as a major literary talent. We'll start off with some of his short story collections. The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, The October Country, Dandelion Wine, and his novels Fahrenheit 451 and Something Wicked This Way Comes. American Library has produced omnibus editions of Ray Bradbury's work. Philip K. Dick, 1928 to 1982. According to the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, this U.S. writer is one of the 2 or 3 most important figures in 20th century U.S. SF. He has also crossed over into the mainstream and become an author of note. He began his career with short stories in the 1950s and then moved into novels in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. The earlier PKD novels and stories often lost control of his material. He would get sidetracked and was unable to find resolution. When he found the tale within his grasp, he was brilliantly inventive, gaining access to imaginative realms which no other writer of SF had reached. All of his work continues to be in print. Some of the highlights: A Scanner Darkly, The Man in the High Castle, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?, which was adapted into the classic film Blade Runner. Speaking of movies, the Philip K. Dick Reader is a collection of stories, and included are stories that inspired the movies Total Recall, Screamers, Minority Report, Paycheck, and Next. An American library has honored Philip K. Dick with omnibus editions. Frank Herbert, 1920 to 1986. Herbert worked as a reporter and editor on a number of West Coast newspapers before becoming a full-time writer. In 1963 to 64, Dune World was serialized in Astounding Science Fiction. It was followed in 1965 by The Prophet of Dune. These stories were combined in the novel Dune of 1965. Dune went on to win the Nebula and Hugo Award. Although Herbert has written other science fiction novels, the Dune series is what he is known for. Here in order are his Dune books. Dune. Dune Messiah. Children of Dune. God Emperor of Dune. Heretics of Dune. And Chapter House Dune. Dune has had a resurgence of late with the Denis Villeneuve films. Ursula K. Le Guin, 1929 to 2018. She is a U.S. writer based in Portland, Oregon. Her first novel was published in 1966, and by 1970 she was spoken of as one of the most important writers within the field. Her reputation has extended far beyond the readership of genre SF. While within the genre, she has been honored with 5 Hugos and 4 Nebulas. More attention has been paid to her by the academic community than to any other modern SF writer. All of her work is in print. Here are 3 of her important novels. The Left Hand of Darkness. The Lathe of Heaven. The Dispossessed. American Library has collected her stories and novels in omnibuses. All the books I've been showing you from these 10 authors are currently available. Here are some new prints that I have from some of these authors. I have an H.G. Wells classic collection, and you can see here the books that are found in here. If you're interested in John Wyndham, Modern Library has some recent printings. There are a number of publications of Ray Bradbury's work. Here are a couple ones that I picked up. And if you have access to SF Masterworks, there are quite a few that I showed you that are in the SF Masterworks. For example, we have Ursula K. Le Guin, The Left Hand of Darkness, and The Dispossessed. Lathe of Heaven as well is in there. Or Philip K. Dick, Do Andrews Dream of Electric Sheep, A Scanner Darkly, Ubik, and Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. They also have Rendezvous for Rama, and Robert A. Heinlein, Starship Troopers. So if you're interested in any of these continuously published authors, you can find their books today. Now, as promised, I have 4 honorable mentions. 3 of them I decided not to include because really it's one novel that has been in continuous print. And the last one was a late cut. If I'd gone to 11 authors whose work has been in continuous print, this one would be the next one. So let's take a look. Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, is an 1818 Gothic novel written by English author Mary Shelley. Many consider this the first science fiction novel. She predates the fathers of science fiction, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. Brave New World by English author Aldous Huxley is a dystopian novel published in 1932. 1984 is a dystopian novel as well, A Cautionary Tale by English writer George Orwell. All three of these novels have academic recognition and have been taught in schools and universities. Kurt Vonnegut, 1922 to 2007. He was an American author known for his satirical and darkly humorous novels. Perhaps his most famous novel is Slaughterhouse-Five. His 14 novels and 3 short story collections are still in print today. An American library has created omnibuses of his work. Until next time, find that vintage science fiction and keep reading.